Hello and welcome to this introduction to Mosaic overlay crochet. So this is the chart and the pattern that we're going to crochet today. There are a few simple rules, we'll just go through them when we get there. The most important one is that you basically crochet this in individual rows, always going from right to left. And then at the end of the row, that's it, you change your colour, and rather than turning your work and going back the other way around, you will always start again over here on the right with your next row going across, back to your initial colour A, going across again. Let's get started.
My colours today are yellow, so that's going to be my colour A, and I've got this pink to be my colour B.
Starting off with a slip knot, and in this pattern we need 13 stitches across. 5, 10, 11, 12, 13. Each of these squares in this pattern represents one stitch, so we're going to need 13 stitches. Also got the written version down here, and confirms we've counted correctly, 13 stitches for the rows. So we're going to start with a foundation chain. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. I'm now going to add an additional chain for my turning chain and then start crocheting row 1, which is just a row of single crochets. And I'm going to crochet these working into the back bumps of my foundation chain. Up. There we go, because that just gives you a really nice edge at the bottom. (11) and 12 and number 13. There we go. And you can see by crocheting into the back bumps, I've just got a slightly neater edge here than you get if you're crocheting into the front or the back loops. Right, that's the end of the row. And to finish off the row, we're just going to do one more chain, cut this off and pull through. So row 2, as I said earlier, is also going to start on the right over here. So we're now doing row 2. And for reading this chart, it's very important. It does not matter what colour the square is. We're going to crochet this entire row in colour B, which is my red pink over here. So don't need to worry about the different coloured squares here at all for now. We're just going to crochet row 2 in colour B. And again, having a look at the written pattern here, row 1 colour A, we did out 13 single crochets. Row 2 colour B, 13 single crochets again. For starting the row, we're going to make a slip knot. And I personally like to use a slightly different technique depending on whether my row starts with a single crochet or a double crochet. If you've learned a different technique, if you prefer a slightly different method, don't worry, just go with what works for you, but I'm just going to show you how I do it. In this row, I'm going to find this first stitch, and I've got my slip knot on the hook already, and I'm inserting my hook into the back loop of this first stitch. starting with a single crochet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull through once, yarn over and pull through again, and this is my first single crochet of the row. Now with Mosaic overlay crochet, one of the rules is all single crochets are worked into the back loop of the previous row. So this whole row of single crochets, we're going to work every single stitch into the back loop of our first row, just like that. And just moving across the row. Got one more pull through for another chain, and again cut off, pull through, and here we are. This is what we've crocheted so far. Now, as we've said earlier, we've completely ignored the fact that there are some stitches in a different colour and that this one, according to the pattern, should actually be yellow. How is that going to happen? Well, all of this magic happens in the row above, in row 3, when we're going back to our yellow yarn. We're once again starting with a slip knot. Let's get that ready and then have another look at the chart here. So you will have noticed that in this chart you've got stitches, so squares, that have X's in them and other stitches that don't have any X's. And that's where your different stitches come in. So for the colour, the only thing you have to worry about is your row crocheted in colour A, colour B, or colour A, or colour B, as it says at the back here. For what stitch to do, the only thing you have to worry about is not the colour of the square, it's only whether your square has an X or not. If your square doesn't have an X, it means you're crocheting a single crochet. And all single crochets always into the back loop of the previous row. If your square has an X, that means you're crocheting a double crochet. So let's move on to that. Our row 3, colour A back to yellow, starts with a double crochet. When we start a row with a double crochet, insert the hook again, going into that back loop of the first stitch, slip knot already on the hook, pull through, and for the single crochet we then yarned over again. For the double crochet we pull all the way through, attaching this slip knot with a slip stitch. Let's just do that again. Slip knot on the hook, insert into the back loop of the first stitch, yarn over, pull through, and pull all the way through for a slip stitch. Then we're going to do one chain, and now this is when we're starting our double crochet. In Mosaic overlay crochet, the double crochets are always worked into the front loop 2 rows below. So we're not going to work into this pink row here, we're going to work into the front loop of the yellow row. So you're always working into the previous row of the same colour. And because we've worked our stitches into the back loop when we did the second row, all these front loops are now sort of just here, you can see them, and ready for us to work any double crochets into. So normal double crochet, just yarn over, and it helps if you sort of fold this over a bit, pinch it a bit, so that you end up with this ridge of the front loops. Makes it easier to get your hook in. Insert your hook into that front loop, pull through once, pull through twice, pull through 3 times, and you've done a double crochet. And you see that this double crochet now sits in front of the single crochets that we did in row 2. And that's how you end up with your yellow stitch in row 2, despite the whole row being crocheted in pink. Now, moving along, first stitch was a double crochet. Next 3 stitches don't have an X in them. The colour, again, doesn't matter at all. No X means single crochet. So we're going to do 3 single crochets. And they're, as all single crochets, they're going to be worked into the back loops. So we're just going to go into the back loops here. 1 and 2 and 3. Next stitch is another double crochet. So again, we're going to yarn over and then not work into this pink row, but go into the previous yellow row into that front loop here. So pinch it a little bit again, just to make it easier to get in there. And there we go. That's our double crochet done. Now, next up we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 single crochets. Into the back loop again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and number 7. And then finally we're finishing with another double crochet. So again, yarning over and working into that front loop here of the previous row in the same colour. And do another chain. Pull through, and that's our 3rd row finished. You've got the option to crochet all of this via the chart and count your stitches and look at your X's, or you can just look at the written pattern, which essentially spells all of this out for you. So what we did in row 3 was we crocheted a double crochet, 3 single crochets, another double crochet, then we did our 7 single crochets, and we finished with a double crochet. So it's just spelling out what you've seen in the chart over here. And it's really up to you which one you prefer. For irregular patterns that I find a bit unpredictable, I quite like using the written instructions. If it's something that's really intuitive, how it all lines together, I sometimes prefer using the chart. If I'm using the written instructions, the chart can be really, really useful to see whether you've made a mistake somewhere, and if something doesn't feel quite right, just check over with the chart. Let's go and move on to row number 4. We're back to colour B, so that's my pink here. And again, we're starting with a slip knot to fasten this. Hook through. And row 4, no X, so we're starting with a single crochet. Again, we're going to find this first stitch. Be careful that you actually use the first stitch, so the one above the double crochet, not your little slip knot chain bit from over here. So first actual stitch into the back loop, pull through once, yarn over, pull through again, and we've done our first single crochet. Next up, we've got an X in our box, so we're going to do a double crochet. Yarn over, and just like we did before, we're not going to work into the previous row, but 2 rows down, so into the previous row of the same colour, previous pink row. You can see that unused front loop here again, and yarn over, insert into that front loop, and finish your double crochet. There we go. Next up, we've got another single crochet, no X in the box. So single crochet is always in the back loop. Next stitch, double crochet. And again, we yarn over and we insert the hook into this front loop of the previous pink row. Then we've got another single crochet into the back loop and double crochet into the front loop of the previous pink row. Next up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 single crochets. If you look at the written pattern for row 4, we've had 1 single, double, single, double, single, double, and now here's our 5 single crochets. So we're going to do exactly that. And if you're not already tired of hearing it's always into the back loop as all single crochets. And 5. Now we've got 1 more double crochet, X in the stitch box, into that front loop here. Oops, catching my tail a bit. And we're finishing off no X, single crochet. Chain 1, cut off, pull through, and here we go. So you can always already sort of start to see that pattern come about a little bit. Next up, we're back to yellow. Again, to fasten the yarn, we're going to make a slip knot, and we're starting our row with a double crochet. So to start with a double crochet, once again, into the back loop of this first stitch, pull straight through, so slip stitch that on, chain 1, then yarn over and work into the front loop of the previous yellow row. Now, next up, we've got 3 single crochets. You know what I'm going to say, into the back loop, exactly. And then a double crochet right there. Next up, another single. And you can see here that we've already got our little box here coming out in the pattern. And this bit over here, at the moment, doesn't really look like we would expect it to look because of this pink row going across. But you can also see that we've now got 5 double crochets coming up. So all of these double crochets will be crocheted over the top of these pink single crochets and essentially masking them out so we won't see them in our final pattern. So 5 double crochets 2, 3, 4, and I'm catching my ends again, and 5, a single crochet, and then to finish a double crochet. So single crochet first, and to finish a double crochet again into that front loop here. Chain 1, cut the tail, pull through, and ta-da! As I said earlier, these double crochets have been crocheted over that line of pink single crochets that we had, so now we no longer see that this line was originally crocheted in pink. I will let you continue with the pattern from here, and I will meet you back when you have crocheted row number 11. If you haven't come to this from one of my patterns, now's a good time to just pause, and then that way you will have this chart right in front of you on the screen. And here we are again. Hopefully your little swatch now looks something very similar to this, with our box pattern nicely resembled. And hopefully you enjoyed this little tutorial and got along with the method okay. Couple more things. First off, ends. You've got quite a few options. You're gonna have to deal with them somehow. Unfortunately, that's the downside of Mosaic overlay crochet. You get a lot of ends. So option number 1 is you just weave them in at the back. You've got that nicely stripy pattern, so you can quite easily kind of just weave them in between that same colour. Those of you who really don't like weaving in ends, one option is to crochet a double border around your little piece. Have a search on YouTube. I don't have a tutorial for that, partly because I have to confess that I personally really don't enjoy making borders. However, I do admit they give you a really nice finish, and there's some fantastic tutorials out there, so just have a search, and I'm sure you'll find one that can help you out there. I think for me it's that I always find that weaving in the ends actually takes me less time than crocheting a border, but as I said, entirely up to you. It might be your cup of tea, and if you love the double border finish, then that's definitely what you should do. The nice, convenient, lazy option is you just work these into a bit of a fringe. I quite like to bulk them out a little bit. So what I tend to do is just take a little bit of extra yarn of my 2 colours and take my crochet hook and just insert that somewhere here, around about where I want my fringy bit to sit. Pull that through. So now I've just got these bits here, and together with my ends, I'm going to take this and just make a knot, and just trying to get that close to my edge, but not so close that it will start bunching the edge together. You don't want that. You want it to give just enough wiggle room that it doesn't bunch your edge together, but close enough that it looks neat and tidy. Like that. Give the individual ones a bit of a pull, just to tighten it up. And then cut this off at whatever length you wanted. And you end up with this nice, funky little fringy tassel border along your piece. Works particularly well for scarves, but is also a cute little finish for blankets. So that's my favourite hack if you're feeling just a little overwhelmed by all of those ends. Final note, we've already mentioned the stripy look on the back. One thing that you might have noticed is that in the bits where you've crocheted several double crochets in a row and ignored those single crochets because you've crocheted over them, you kind of end up with a sort of slightly flappy bit on the back, and especially here where we've just finished on a bunch of double crochets, it's flapping around a little bit and it's not actually that nice a finish. So if you want to up your game a little bit, head over to my anchored double crochets for Mosaic overlay crochet tutorial, and I will show you a nifty hack of how to deal with those flappy bits. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and happy crocheting. Bye.